Barbers, stylists, hairdressers of Reddit. Has anyone ever sat in your chair with a head so nasty that you didn't even want to touch them? What is your horror story? One of the first shops I worked in, there were two individuals who would regularly come in for cuts. Both of them were physically so dirty it changed their skin tone, and they absolutely reeked of cat pee. Being close to them made my eyes water, and it was extremely difficult to breathe as the smell of ammonia was just plain overwhelming. We never turned them away, and we were always as polite as we could be. But frick if those haircuts didn't feel like they lasted 3 hours. I've always heard that users often give off an ammonia cat pee smell. Long time ago, but I had to wash and cut a teenager that hadn't washed his hair in what looked like months. Salon policy was to wash after a men's cut and the smell was awful. After his cut, I tried to wet his hair in the shampoo bowl and the water just ran off his hair because of all the oil buildup. I had seen a lot during my years as a stylist, but that was the worst experience. Imagining water not being able to penetrate oily hair is the grossest thing I've heard of in this thread. Older ladies that came in for a wash and a water while that had a helmet of hairspray of 4 weeks old was pretty normal. Had one client that had really bad psoriasis and no hairdresser wanted to help him. He was also very ashamed, so we made the deal that he could come in after closing time. It was really bad and most of the equipment, combs, clips, were disposed instead of disinfected. As someone with this condition, thank you for not turning him away. It's not contagious at all, but can freak the heck out of people. I've been lucky that when mine has been pretty bad on my scalp, my hairdressers were still okay with working with me, but I think the longer hair helps mask the problem a bit. My husband is a barber. One day he had a guy come in with dreads, wanting them all shaved off. He parted his dreads, looked at his scalp and noticed it was green. He touched it and saw it ripple. Asked the guy when he'd last washed his hair. He replied, about 3 years ago. My husband realized the guy's whole scalp was covered in a layer of pus. Sent him straight to A&E to have it drained and treated with antibiotics. Bye. My sister is a hairstylist and got scabies once from a kid. Apparently the mom knew the kid had it too. Just didn't tell my sister until they were leaving. Yuck. Horror story of mine. I used to babysit for the neighborhood. One day I got these kids that were scratching at their heads after taking them outside, but because they were playing in the sandbox together, 13 and 8, I figured that there was sand in their hair and reminded them to shower when they got home. Go to get my hair done the next day. Hair was down to my mid-back and I asked for a short bob just below my ears. Halfway through, the hairdresser stops and loudly announces to everyone in the shop, people I knew were there, that she could not continue to cut my hair because I had lice. I was so embarrassed. You could have at least taken me to the side and explained instead of making me feel dirty. If I had known, I would have dealt with it, especially if someone was gonna be dealing with my hair. I still blush when I think back on it. Sound like the time a bank teller shouted at me. I couldn't hear her through the thick glass and tiny holes drilled for her voice that I had bounced to check. The entire lobby heard her because she not only turned on her little microphone, but shouted into it as well. My dad was a hairdresser before he passed. When I was young, I had really bad psoriasis on my scalp. My dad has been the only one to ever cut my hair. Passed 3 months ago, and I can't bring myself to get my hair cut, even though it's desperately needed, in my 25 years on this planet. And I can remember a few times sitting in his chair where he was literally combing and cutting out large chunks of dead, flaky skin. It was the most embarrassed I have ever been in front of him, because no matter how many topical remedies I tried, I couldn't get it to go away. Eventually grew out of the psoriasis, but I still hold on to this moment as one of my favorite moments, where the love my dad had for me really shone through. My mother was a hairdresser in the 1960s for Vidalsasson. During the time of the beehive, customers wouldn't wash their hair for weeks. They'd just keep spraying it to keep it in place as it was such a complicated do. This meant a lot of fleas, lice, and on one occasion cockroaches that had to be washed out. For some reason this never bothered my mother all that much, but hearing about it made sure I never, ever wanted any kind of hands-on customer service job. I used to work as a receptionist at a high-end salon. One day, a lady called and asked if we had anyone who specialized in cutting curly hair. I matched her up with someone, asked the standard questions, and made the appointment, which turned out to be for her granddaughter. When the family showed up, the mother and grandmother were white, and the granddaughter was African American. They obviously didn't know, and didn't bother to learn, how to take care of the girl's hair, because it was in a giant, waist-length ponytail that was completely matted. She also had a bit of a developmental disability, and they claimed she would not wash her hair herself. I could smell her as soon as she walked in, but when the stylist got her hair wet at the shampoo bowl, the smell quickly permeated the entire salon. It was like a punch to the gut. The hairstylist had to keep coming up front for fresh air. She said giant flakes, sheets of dandruff and buildup were basically crusted to the girl's scalp and throughout her hair. The matted ponytail was the worst of it. What should have been a simple 45-minute service ended up taking over 4 hours. The girl looked great when she was done. I felt terrible for her because it was pretty obvious that her mom and grandma had no intention of keeping her hair maintained. I got the impression that they basically only took her for a haircut when things got completely out of control. I was horrified that they apparently weren't even bothering to wash her hair at home. They bought a bunch of products that the stylist recommended, but ended up returning everything a day or 2 later. That poor child. My hairdresser says she had one lady who brought her kid in for haircuts and the mom never brushed the kid's hair ever, so my hairdresser had to spend upwards of 45 minutes trying to comb the knots out of a squirming kid's hair. I think she eventually fired the client because it wasn't worth the cost of a kid's haircut to spend the better part of an hour just on combing. We had that happen in a salon that I worked in. Because of the way that the mom treated the little girl, we ended up calling CPS. I left that job before I ever saw any resolution, though. I think about that little girl all the time. Way back in the day, my mom was a hairdresser. She told me a story once of this guy coming in who had bird shit all over the top back of his head. Guess he got pooped on and didn't notice or something. I had a young man come in with his mother. He was about 8 years old and had tight curly hair. His mother asked me to shave down to a 0.00000, that is the shortest you can go with clippers. I said sure. It was my last cut of the day and I was eager to go home. I start the service and notice barely 1/3 RD in that he had a lice infestation under the tight curly hair. I mean, these guys were huge. Probably why his mother needed me to shave it off. So, I discontinued the service and spent the next 3 hours disinfecting everything in sight. The boy's mother called the barbershop later to complain because I wouldn't finish shaving her son's hair. We tried to explain that it was illegal for us to continue the service as it might spread lice to others and recommended a specialty shop that could take care of this for them, but she demanded that it was because we were racist. That was fun. I once had to turn a lady away after she booked in for hair extension removal. The micro-bonded type your stylist should tell you last 3 months maximum. Nobody told this lady. They had been in for 7 months. My boss booked her in with me. The extensions weren't done in my salon. I took one look at it and told her I couldn't help. There was a chunk of hair about 6 inches wide that was matted with bits of hair glue, not what we use, poking out. To me, her options were shave it or cut it almost to the scalp. Some hairdressers shouldn't be allowed. Bit of a different horror story, but my stylist once had a woman with hair past her butt who wanted to donate everything to Locks of Love. Everything. This woman with hair down nearly to her thighs says she wants a pixie cut and is donating everything else. After checking multiple times to see that she was positive she wanted a pixie and not a short bob or anything, the stylist starts cutting. The woman sobbed the entire time, like shoulder shuddering sobs in the dressing chair with her sad little haircut cape on. Stylist kept asking if it was okay, but the woman was determined to help people with cancer and told her to keep going and to ignore her tears. My stylist said it was the most awkward experience of her life. Other customers kept coming in and probably assumed she was maiming this poor woman. Side story, when you donate hair to Locks of Love, the hair doesn't go to cancer patients, it goes to make high-end wigs that are sold, and the proceeds of the sale go to buy wigs for cancer patients. Not that this is bad, just the fact. I'm not a stylist for humans, but I do groom dogs and I have seen some things that make me want to never give these dogs back to their owners. My worst experience was when I had someone bring in their 2-year-old Shih Tzu. She was down as a mini groom. That's where we only trim the face, feet, and private areas, so I'm thinking this will be an easy groom. Wrong. This woman walked in with her dog wrapped in a towel because she doesn't want to touch him, and I can see why. The dog is a mess. The dog's hair is one solid mat including his face, and there is a deep giant hole in his coat where the poop has exploded through his hair, meaning he has been pooping into his own hair for so long the buildup finally busted a hole through his hair. So I have to shave him before he can get any kind of bath, so I find a spot I can break through and start shaving. This is very bad on my tools, by the way. Once I finally release this dog from his mat prison, which came off almost in one solid piece, he ends up having so many sores on his skin. He was shaking his head so much he was starting to cause hematomas on his ears. His butthole was infected and he is infested with fleas. I'm so upset at this point. I feel so terrible for this poor dog, but all I can do is bathe him, get rid of the fleas, and inform the owner that he needs to go to the vet. Whoa, I didn't even think about pet grooming. I bet that can get crazy. I feel bad every time I take my dog to the groomer and there's a small mat somewhere. When I was an assistant at my first salon right out of school, we had classes every Wednesday night. Well, one week I couldn't find a model in time, so my mentor had someone she knew come in and be my model. So the model comes in, seems perfectly normal. She sits in my chair, I start the consultation and start looking through her hair to see what I'd need to do. Apparently this young lady had not washed her hair in what I'm assuming was weeks, because her hair was so greasy that every time I touched her hair my hand came back drenched in grease. And the smell. Oh man, I'll never forget that smell. It was the worst thing I've ever had the displeasure of working with. I asked my mentor if I could shampoo her before starting and was told that I couldn't. So here I am working on this girl who almost literally has grease dripping from her hair. I must have washed my hands 10 times that night. Needless to say, I had my own model for every class after that one. I have other stories from my time teaching as well. Lots of lice and people leaving the school bleeding. TLDR. Couldn't get a model for class. Was supplied one with an oil slick on her head. My cousin is a hairdresser. One time a woman brought in her special needs son. He had some hygiene issues and his ears were covered in blackheads. While all the other hairdressers recoiled in horror, my cousin gritted her teeth and gave that kid the best haircut she could. I really respected my cousin after that. That poor kid. I wonder if his mom just ignored it or if she couldn't do anything about it because of his condition. Not a hairdresser or my story, but when my sister was young, elementary school aged, she didn't like to brush her thick hair and it was always a source of grief. My mom took her to get her hair cut, and after the hairdresser tried to brush her hair for a minute, she said that sister needed to brush it herself. So my sister had to sit in the lobby with a brush until the tangles were gone. It was some pretty effective social shaming. LOL. I hated brushing my hair as a kid, but it never got that bad. If it had, I'm pretty sure my mother would have just cut it all off herself. My wife once worked at a store that hosted princess parties for young girls, normally around ages of 4-10. They would all put on gowns, get their hair styled and have a tea party, whatever. As my wife started styling one girl's hair, the host queen of the party, naturally, she noticed something on the end of her comb. Lice. Head infested with tons of crawling white lice. Being the awesome professional my wife is, she quietly stopped combing, washed her hands and threw the comb away. She then pulled the girl's mother aside to the little girl's chair and quietly informed her of what she had found. The mother apparently wanted this day to be awful for her daughter. She started screaming and rushed to the chair, digging into her daughter's hair. The mother was not quiet about it. She was screaming, "She has lice," over and over, while her daughter started crying in the chair with all her friends gawking at her like a free freak show. This is why therapists make money. Jesus, what sort of monster parent does that to their own child? I had a woman come in one day who had hair halfway down her back. She just wanted a trim. I got her shampooed, into my chair and began combing her hair, and noticed a peculiar smell and what looked a bit like dry scalp, but not quite. I looked a bit closer and the flakes were actually little translucent nits. Lice eggs. I could see tiny black things. Hairdressers are of course not doctors, so we can't diagnose, which means I had to tell this woman that she needed to go see a doctor and I couldn't do her hair, but I couldn't come right out and tell her she had lice. I told her it looked like it might be lice, and she worked with kids so it was a good guess. She was so embarrassed. I had to throw away a really nice cape along with several towels and had to disinfect everywhere she had been. I had some people over about 8 years who had crusty stuff on the scalp and around the ears. They tended to go a while between baths, which you can tell because people develop a funky smell in their hair. The hair gets a distinct aroma. Little kid hair has a similar smell. It takes a lot of washing to get that odor off your hands. You can actually place the cape in a sealed bag for so many days and the lice will die. That way you won't be throwing capes away, because this will happen many more times. I would just toss the combs though if necessary. This was while I was still in school. Dirty looking woman came in needing her hair washed and probably cut too. She had open sores all over her face and neck, which meant she probably had them on her head too. Her hair was completely dreaded into one huge red from how dirty and tangled it was. I was in the middle of putting conditioner on her when she informed me she was HIV positive for over 15 years. Nope. Not a hairdresser, but I think I might have been the nasty client. I desperately needed a haircut, but I also had a cyst on my head that was fairly large. My hairdresser was very quiet for once, and that's never a good sign with a hairdresser. In my defense, I tried to get a doctor to fix the cyst, but she wasn't able to dig all of it out of my scalp, and it grew back. And maybe a week or two after the haircut, I popped the cyst like the nastiest pimple ever known to creation. Seriously, the amount of stuff that came out put me into a bit of shock, and my hands looked like I'd been messing with a gunshot wound. On the bright side, popping the cyst managed to blow the whole thing out. It never regrew, and my hairdresser was happy with me again. When I was in school, I had a regular client who was around 90 years old and pretty sassy. She had a growth on her head that was at least 4 inches long and 2 inches wide. It was irregular and black and red and is what I would draw if you asked me to draw melanoma. She refused to accept advice about going to the doctor for it. I gave her a perm a couple of times and just tried to pretend it wasn't there, but I can still see it 10 years later. I used to be a dog groomer and I had a golden doodle come in matted to crap and the entire strip down the hair literally was all one piece. I could have theoretically worn it if I wanted to. Owner got mad because I went shorter than what she wanted. Fun times. Customary, not a hairdresser, but I just have to share this story. When I was a broke butt student, I was in a place like Walmart getting my hair cut. An old lady comes in and sits in the chair beside me. She says to the hairdresser, "Oh yes, and by the way, I have a large boil on the back of my neck." Hairdresser says okay. Old lady says yes. "So can you squeeze it?" The hairdresser started looking around for tweezers or something and I looked firmly at my lap and tried not to barf. The answer to anybody dating "can you squeeze this" should always be no. Just no. I am a hairstylist and have plenty of stories about clients, but this was a story told to me by a former co-worker who was also a stylist. We will call her Jen. Well, when Jen first got out of school, she also did nails. One day she has a manicure come into her salon and was getting ready to soak her nails. Takes the ladies and notices dried dirt or something lodge under nails. Jen tells her to go wash her hands before they start and the woman makes a comment how she had her period. That gunky crap under nails was dried period blood. This happened in hair school and I wouldn't say it was entirely my fault, but I guess that is for you to decide. So I was toward the end of my time in school and I had been out on the floor taking clients for a couple months. A woman came in with very long, very dry looking hair and told me she wanted a perm. At this point I was already beginning to get nervous, but I figure I might have time to talk her out of it. For anyone who doesn't know, perms can be really harsh on your hair. Not a lot of stylists I know like to perform them because they take a long time to wrap. They stink. They can turn frizzy really easily. And they are super hard on the client's hair. I can't tell you how many girls have brought in pictures of Taylor Swift and expected me to give them a perm that will come out like her natural curls or her iron curls. So this woman is sitting in my chair with her hair probably measuring 3+ feet long and she wants a perm. So I do a quick integrity test on her hair to see how strong it is and if it can handle the chemicals. I'm already predicting that her hair is too weak for the solution, but I check anyway. Lo and behold, her hair breaks off in my hand. At this point I have my instructor come over and help me talk to this lady about the possible risks of her hair falling out or breaking off or becoming super frizzy, and this lady is having none of it. So per school procedure we have her sign a waiver saying that we made her aware of all the potential risks and that it may not come out how she wants it and we are not liable and we're just students blah blah blah. She happily signs the waiver and sits back. This whole time I'm freaking out because waiver or not I did not want to be the one responsible for fricking up her hair. I ended up going to the director of the school because I didn't feel comfortable performing the service and she told me to do it anyway or go home and lose hours. So I walked back to the chair and spent 2 hours wrapping a freaking piggyback perm on this lady, and when I finally get her to the shampoo bowl, as predicted, her hair begins to break and fall out. My instructor and I worked for another hour and a half rinsing and styling her hair, and when we were done it was horrific. To say it looked like crap would be a massive understatement. I was on the brink of tears and my instructor was stressed and exhausted, but this lady was as happy as can be. She paid, gave me a big tip, and disappeared into the night. TLDR. In hair school I am forced by my instructor to perform a perm on a client with long, brittle hair and she comes out looking like an ugly poodle. Haha, not me, and technically not hair, but my best friend went to cosmetology school and said the majority of pedicure practice came from old men who would come in to get their toenails cut. Because they were too old to do it, couldn't reach them, whatever. One girl is cutting some old man's toenails and one went flying right into her mouth. I think I just mentally barfed. Nurse here, but had a patient once with not so much dreadlocks as a single dread cap. I thought neurosurgery had occurred because she was admitted wearing an oar hat. It was to hide the mess beneath. The facility hairdresser had to give her a crew cut. I did a stint of barbering school last year before my wife and I split. She is a hairstylist and I only did it to appease her. Anyway, I had some nasty haircuts during my time there. The most notable was this group of guys that came in and they were all family, I think, and older, maybe 40s, but looked like man children. So I get this one guy who is in sweats and looks like he hasn't showered in a good 2 weeks. He sits down and I could instantly smell him. It was putrid. And it wasn't like dirty homeless bad, it was like super BO greasy stank. I cape him up and he clearly has no idea what he wants, so we go back and forth and he wants a trim or whatever as he had like maybe 5 inches of hair. I wept his hair and I kid you not, it was one of the nastiest smells of my entire life. For those of you who don't know, hair smells when wet, and if you have dirty hair it's amplified a lot. It was foul. So at this point I'm at arm's length, fully leaning back as far as I can to keep away from the stink. I'm breathing sporadically to try and not gag. His hair was thick and coarse and greasy. You ever leave lunch meat in the fridge for too long and look at it and it has a slime over it? That's what it was like touching his hair. So I make it through the cut and of course he's being difficult at the end, making me take it shorter and shorter until I got to a point where I think I used a guard and just buzzed his head. I clean him up and he stands up and the seat is just sweat stained, like thick coated in booty sweat, but not like normal sweat, it's like sticky and glossy looking. So they leave and I tell my teacher I need some Lysol to wipe my station down, and at this point I can feel hair grease all over my body, my hands, arms, face. I feel like it was in my pores. I washed my hands and got a new cape and pretty much wanted to light myself on fire to feel clean. It sucked and I told them I'd never do that guy again even if they gave me a 0 for the cut. There were some nasty ones but that was the worst. In cosmetology school we used to do a program where homeless and shelter people could come in for free services. I thought the program was fantastic if they wanted a haircut or shave, etc. Unfortunately a lot of these people would take advantage of it and get unnecessary services because they were free. One of my worst nightmares was a teenage boy whose mom made him come in for the afternoon to get whatever he wanted. So he got a haircut, okay. Then he wanted a shave. Also okay. Then a manicure. They're kind of unnecessary. Then a pedicure. His feet were disgusting. I don't think his socks were washed in a month. And then he insisted we do French polish on them. It was awful. Then he decided he wanted a facial and a back facial. OMG, I am going to die at this point. And I can't turn him down because that's policy at the school. So this kid had the worst acne in the world. And here I am just massaging his face. And then back. And it felt like Crater Town. And while giving the facial he kept his eyes open and was smiling the whole time while staring at me. It was the worst 4 hours of my entire life to deal with this kid. Then when his mom comes to pick him up, she actually said to me, "Oh, you gave him a facial?" You should have popped some of those pimples he had. Oh no thank you. Alrighty, I am officially done with this thread. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.